My name's Patrick Foley, and this is my review of Freedom Street for UK Film Review. So, the film is a documentary made by an Australian-Indonesian filmmaker. It covers the plight of refugees who are caught between Indonesia and Australia. The director explains in the beginning of the movie that he himself had to seek asylum in Australia, having travelled from Indonesia. The film then covers the history of the two nations, how attitudes towards refugees and asylum seekers have formed both in Australia and in Indonesia. And then it follows the lives of three refugees, Joniad, Nur Aziza, and Ashraf Hussein, three individuals who've all had experience trying to seek asylum in Australia, have all undergone the sort of nightmarish process which is required of them to seek safety, to escape persecution from their own country, and the devastating and dangerous consequences for each of their lives. The documentary is a fantastic account both of the real-world history behind the sort of plight of refugees in Australia, and how the governments between Australia and Indonesia have created a hostile environment for people looking to flee persecution and seek safety in Australia, whilst also showing a real-life account of refugees, real-life stories of the three individuals the documentary sort of follows and focuses on, which really cuts through the sort of technical and legal focus of the film in a lot of ways, and backs up why it's so important that changes to the way asylum seekers and refugees are considered and handled in Australia, why that change is really, really important to make. Life stories of the individuals who the director focuses on are fascinating. They're worthy of a film in their own right, particularly Nur Aziza, whose life is followed over the course of many years, growing up in so many ways, from being a young girl into being a young woman and forced to live a life far beyond her years. The fact that the director was able to find and identify such fascinating and interesting and emotive stories really only seeks the point that so many refugees are going to have a similar experience, all who are worthy of admiration and respect. And it's these accounts that help really cut through what can be at times quite technical and detailed analysis and assessment of a political environment that not every viewer is going to be familiar with. The documentary was made in Australia, of course, and many of the incidents discussed will be more familiar to Australian audiences, and many of the political kind of discussion will be familiar to Australian viewers, but not so much in the UK. It's newer. It's something we won't be as familiar with. But nevertheless, the director, Alfred Peck, does a fantastic job of breaking this down into really simple and straightforward analysis, which means viewers will be able to get up to speed very, very quickly. And in fact, many of the discussion points that are seen in the documentary, which are being held halfway around the world, will appear very, very similar to UK audiences. We hear similar things from our own politicians and on the front pages of our own newspapers. And so, despite being two completely separate countries to our own, the documentary is still very, very relevant and very contemporary because of that. There are times where the documentary feels a little overlong and has a tendency to ramble a little bit and go down a few rabbit holes. The stories of the refugees themselves are incredible and fascinating, but there are long stretches of sort of talking head pieces which can go on for quite a long time. The stories they're telling are that engrossing that it doesn't really detriment the documentary, but perhaps a little bit more of a heavier touch with editing would have benefited the overall film. But all in all, the documentary is really, really impressive, especially considering a sort of lower budget, more of a homemade effort. It is really, really fantastic, and a devastating portrayal, really, of how Australia handles refugees and handles asylum seekers. It's the type of documentary, really, that everyone should see, and will, I'm no doubt, change a lot of minds, particularly of those who maybe have a certain view of those who seek asylum. Really, really highly recommended, and an overall really, really important piece of work.